Hi, I'm Kyle Randolph. I'm a product manager here at JumpCloud. Welcome to our tutorial video series.
In this video, we're going to cover user management for Linux, leveraging the JumpCloud Agent. Now in this video, we're going to cover a few different pieces, the first of which will be password complexity management done through the JumpCloud console for any JumpCloud managed user. The second is going to be the binding, provisioning, or creation of the user account to a Linux system, in this case my Ubuntu 16.04 machine. Next, I'll sign into that new user's account on the Linux system. And finally, I'll proceed with disabling that user on the Linux machine and taking a look at that process. Now, before we get underway, you'll note that I have a couple things open here. First, I have my Linux machine, which has the JumpCloud agent installed and running on it, as well as the JumpCloud admin login window, which will soon be the JumpCloud admin console as soon as I log in. So I'll plug in my username and password, and now I'm logged in to the JumpCloud admin console. Now, as I noted, the first part of this process I'd like to talk about is setting and changing your password complexity settings in JumpCloud. So I'll navigate from settings into security, and now we can see the variety of different options I can choose to enforce for my user passwords in our organization. The first of which is the minimum character length. So this allows you to set the minimum length of the password for your users. As we look at the other areas, we have password complexity. So what other kinds of enforcements can we have here? Whether or not they're using lowercase, uppercase numbers, uppercase characters, numbers, or special characters. In originality, we can choose to ensure that the passwords that our users are leveraging do not contain their username. Under password aging, I can choose the password history for n number of passwords, as well as the expiration after n number of days. So I can choose if I want to have them cycling their passwords on a shorter interval. I can change that down to 30, or let's say every 6 months. We can up that to 180 days. And the last piece that we have down here is an account locking mechanism. So if the password they enter is incorrect for 3 times or more, or after 3 times rather, it would lock their account. And really what this provides for you is a method to prevent against brute force attacks against your users' accounts. So locking the account makes it more difficult for somebody to be able to brute force their way into one of your user accounts and compromise their credentials. Now, in this case, I don't really need to make any changes to my password complexity, so I'll cancel and head back over to our users section. Now, as I mentioned, we're going to be going through and creating a new user account on this Linux machine. I already have my active user here in the JumpCloud platform, Johnny Apples, that I'm going to be associating to this Linux machine shortly. Now, there's 2 important parts to this association. The user must be active as well as the system. So if I look in the system section, I can see that I have my Ubuntu 16.04 local machine is active and checking into JumpCloud, and just checked in a few seconds ago. With an active user and system in the JumpCloud platform, I'm now ready to make that association and provision or create that user on this Linux machine. So I can select in Systems, Users, and choose my user, Johnny Apples. And in this section, when I select the user under the administrator sudo option, I can choose whether or not they're a standard user, a sudo, or a passwordless sudo account. In this case, they're going to be a standard user. Now, the other way that I can approach this is through the system, or through the users section. So if I select users, my user Johnny Apples, and navigate to systems, I can also make that association. So Ubuntu 16.04 local and standard user. Now, one thing I'd like to note at this point is I'm showing this as a one-to-one association. That's to say, one user, Johnny Apples, to one Linux machine, Ubuntu 16.04. If I'd like to make that association or add a number of users to my Linux machine or a number of machines, that's where our groups feature comes in handy. And if you'd like to learn more about leveraging groups, you can take a look at the link that we've provided below that really allows for a many-to-many association model. But in this case, with our one-to-one association, I've got my one user Johnny, my one Linux machine, so I'm going to save, which will create my user account on this machine. Which, speaking of, this is being done using the JumpCloud Agent, which I already have installed on my Linux machine. If you'd like to learn how that agent is working, we have a whiteboard video that's linked below that covers how the JumpCloud Agent interacts on the system and with JumpCloud. The next piece here is, while this account is being created, one thing I'd like to note is JumpCloud leverages and manages local user accounts on the machine. So you can see the user Johnny's appeared here as a local user account, identical to my user Kyle Randolph on the machine, save the permissibility of account type standard and administrator. And really what this allows for is it allows for local account authentication. So if the user is not connected to the internet or not in the same location as the office, they can still authenticate using their JumpCloud credentials that match with the password complexity settings you've enforced in the admin console. So regardless of internet connectivity or geographic location, your users are still able to authenticate using their JumpCloud credentials. Which, speaking of, now that we have our new user Johnny created on the machine, we'll move to select his account up in the upper right from the settings section, and we'll sign in now using those JumpCloud credentials. So we'll select Johnny and enter in our password and sign in. And with that, I'm now signed in as Johnny on my machine as a local account. Now, the last piece that I'd like to show you here is the process of disabling or revoking access to the account for a user that's JumpCloud managed. So we'll log out, move back over to my admin account here, and we're going to revoke Johnny's access to this machine. So let's open up our user accounts, and we'll hop back into the JumpCloud admin console. Now we're going to pull open Johnny's user account details and select the system's option in the aside. Now, just like we added Johnny to the system using our checkbox option here, I'm going to uncheck Johnny from this Ubuntu machine and select Save. Now, what this is going to tell the machine is to disable Johnny's account, rendering it inaccessible to him. Now, one important thing to note here is that we're not going to delete the data for that user on the machine. We're putting it in a disabled state to allow you as an admin the opportunity to come in and gather any data off of that account prior to fully deleting it, so that you can ensure that no proprietary company information is lost in that disablement process or deletion process. And with that, now I can see for Johnny's account, it is now disabled. So Johnny is no longer able to sign in. And if I move up to the top here and try to sign in to Johnny's account, we'll no longer be able to. And so in this case, we can see the error messaging returned is invalid password, but ultimately, as we saw with the user account from my page, the user is disabled, so there is no means for Johnny to now sign in to this Linux machine. So to recap, we covered password complexity management done through the JumpCloud console for JumpCloud managed users on any endpoint that they're associated to. Then we covered the binding or user account creation process from JumpCloud to a system running the JumpCloud agent. Then we signed into that newly created user account. And finally, we disabled that user from the machine leveraging JumpCloud. Thank you.
Thanks for watching. If you'd like to learn more about this topic, please navigate to support.jumpcloud.com. If you'd like to reach out to someone directly, you can email us at info@jumpcloud.com. And finally, if you'd like to stay current with our upcoming videos, click subscribe.